My mom threw my wedding cake on the floor and said, "Your brother deserves this, and not you." They all laughed. Without saying a word, I left the scene. 6 hours later, the family secret they hid for 20 years exploded. Over the years, my parents always favored my older brother, Dylan. He was the golden boy, the future of the family, the one whose mistakes were just experiments, while mine were disappointments. Growing up, whenever I brought home an A, Mom said, "Good, but your brother brought home an A+ last year." When I cooked, she compared it to Dylan's orders from restaurants he never even cooked. He got a car at 16, I got a lecture at 16 about being humble. But I never expected their favoritism to follow me into adulthood. And I definitely didn't expect it to steal the joy of my wedding day. My name is Elena Brooks, and for as long as I can remember, my family made sure I knew my place. Not in a harsh, militaristic way, but in that soft, manipulative, well-polished way that looks normal on the outside but destroys a child on the inside. The humiliation that happened that day. The disrespect. The way everyone laughed. It almost broke me. Almost. But instead, it unleashed something they never expected. Because 6 hours later, the secret they hid for 20 years, the secret they prayed would never see daylight, exploded in a way none of them could recover from. I was never the girl who dreamed about a palace wedding or a fancy dress. All I wanted was a simple, intimate ceremony with people who loved me, people who valued me, people who wanted to see me happy. I didn't know then that I would get none of that, not from my own blood. My husband, James, is gentle, patient, and endlessly kind, the complete opposite of the chaos I grew up with. He looked perfect standing at the altar, smiling at me like I was the only woman in the world. The atmosphere was beautiful. The decorations simple but elegant. The guests cheerful. Until my family arrived. They walked in 30 minutes late. Dylan swaggered like he was the groom instead of James. My mother's eyes scanned the venue with disgust, as if she was walking through a dirty alley. "This is it," she muttered loudly. "This is the wedding." Several guests turned. I pretended not to hear. I had promised myself I wouldn't let anything ruin this day. But I should have known better. The reception started beautifully. People danced, laughed, ate. Everything felt perfect. Until the moment the photographer announced, "We'll be cutting the cake in 5 minutes." That was when my mother stood up, tapped her glass dramatically, and said loudly, "Everyone, one moment. I have something to say." The crowd quieted. My stomach twisted. Whenever my mother had something to say, someone got hurt. And that someone was usually me. My wedding cake was simple and beautiful. 3 tiers of cream and blush, decorated with delicate sugar flowers. It wasn't extravagant. It wasn't expensive. But it was mine. And it was something I was proud of. The cake was placed on a small decorated table. The photographer positioned us behind it. I could hear people lifting their phones, ready to capture the moment. And then, my mother walked right past me. Right past the photographer. Right up to the cake. Before I could process what she was doing, she dug her fingers under the bottom tier, lifted the entire cake, and threw it onto the floor. It crashed with a loud splatter, cream, sponge, and sugar flowers exploding in every direction. Gasps filled the room. Someone screamed. Someone else shouted, "What the hell?" My heart dropped. My legs went weak. But my mother. She smirked. Then she said the words that sliced through me like a blade. "Your brother deserves this. Not you." And Dylan, my grown brother, a 28-year-old man, laughed. Not a small laugh. A loud, theatrical, proud laugh. My aunt joined him. 2 of my cousins giggled like children. A few guests looked shocked, even horrified. But some just looked away awkwardly, unsure what to do. James started to step forward, anger blazing in his eyes, but I raised my hand slightly. No. Not now. Not here. My mother wiped her hands elegantly with a napkin and shrugged. Honestly, Elena, she said loudly, you should be grateful we even showed up. The room fell silent. Something inside me broke. Something that had been bending under pressure my entire life suddenly snapped. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I simply looked at my mother and said quietly, "Okay." Then I walked out of the hall. In my wedding dress. Without my bouquet. Without my husband. Without explaining anything to anyone. I just walked. And I didn't stop walking until I reached the parking lot. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. But I knew one thing. My silence scared them more than any confrontation would have. I didn't go home. I didn't go back into the hall. I didn't even answer James's frantic calls and texts. Instead, I drove to the one place where the truth always lived. My father's old law office. My father, Richard Brooks, wasn't attending my wedding, not because he disliked me, but because he was always too busy. That man had excuses for everything except loving his own children. He owned a mid-sized law firm, and I had worked there briefly at 19, filing documents and organizing archives. Back then, I discovered something odd, locked in a cabinet. A file with my name and Dylan's name on it. But not for school. Not for insurance. Not for medical records. It was labeled Paternity. Confidential. 2004. At 19, I didn't dare open it. I respected my father's privacy. I respected boundaries. But the moment my mother threw my cake, the moment Dylan laughed, the moment humiliation washed over me in front of my guests, something in me whispered, "Go get the truth." When I reached the law office, I used the spare key under the flower pot. My father never imagined anyone would check there. The office was dark and cold. The smell of legal files and old furniture filled the hallway. I walked straight to the archive room. Drawer 4B. Row 3. Cabinet 12. My hands shook as I unlocked it. The file was still there. Same label. Same handwriting. I opened it. And my breath caught. Inside were DNA test results. A notarized statement. A sealed letter addressed to Elena, when you're old enough. And medical reports showing dates, timelines, and signatures. My eyes scanned the documents, and I felt my knees weaken as the truth hit me like a wave. My father is not Dylan's biological father. My mother had an affair. Dylan was the result. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was written in a single handwritten sentence on the sealed letter. Elena, if you are reading this, it means your mother has finally destroyed you. My heart pounded. I opened the letter. Inside, my father explained everything. How he discovered the affair. How he stayed to protect me. How my mother always favored Dylan because he was her real pride, not the child of the man she secretly resented. My father wrote, "You were the only child I truly loved. But your mother hated that. She destroyed every chance we had at peace." My hands trembled. My throat tightened. 20 years. 20 years of being treated like trash. 20 years of punishment. 20 years of being made to feel unworthy. And it wasn't because I was less. It wasn't because Dylan was better. It was because I reminded my mother of her guilt. And Dylan reminded her of her victory. I closed the file. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg for love. I was going to finish what they started. 6 hours had passed. My family was probably still celebrating somewhere, pretending nothing happened. I sat in my car outside my childhood home. James had called me 42 times. The venue manager had texted me. My maid of honor had offered to take over damage control. But I ignored all of them. I stared at my phone. At a number I had never dialed before. The number belonged to the man listed in the file. Dylan's real father. A man my mother hoped would never resurface. A man she likely told lies about. A man who had no idea his son grew up thinking someone else was his father. I dialed. He answered on the second ring. Hello. Who is this? My voice was steady. Hi. My name is Elena Brooks. I believe you knew my mother, Margaret Brooks, about 28 years ago. Silence. A sharp intake of breath. Then, Elena? Oh my God. I haven't heard that name in decades. I know. And I'm calling because you have a son. The silence on the line turned into something electric. Shock. Realization. Maybe guilt. Maybe anger. What did you just say? You have a 28-year-old son named Dylan. And I think it's time the truth comes out. He exhaled shakily. Elena. Where are you? At my parents' house. There's a wedding party here. You might want to join us. 5 minutes of silence passed. Then he whispered. I'll be there in 20 minutes. My family's house was lit up with music and laughter when I walked in quietly. Yes. After dragging my wedding through the mud, they had gone home to continue partying. Typical. My mother and Dylan were dancing in the living room. My cousins were taking shots. My aunt was gossiping loudly about how emotionally unstable I was. No one even noticed me walk in. Until the doorbell rang. My mother frowned. Who the hell is that? Dylan opened the door. And froze. A tall man with silvering hair stepped inside. He looked like an older clone of Dylan. The room fell silent. My mother's face drained of all color. She staggered back, knocking over a glass. Mark, she whispered, her voice cracking. What are you doing here? Dylan looked confused. Mom, who is this? The man stepped forward. I'm your father, he said calmly. Your biological father. The room erupted. What? Margaret, what is happening? You have explaining to do. Is this a joke? My mother collapsed into a chair, shaking her head violently. No, Mark, leave. Leave. But he didn't. He took out the paternity file I had emailed him. 20 years, Margaret. 20 years you hid my son from me. 20 years you let another man raise him. 20 years you made my daughter feel unloved because she wasn't part of your lie. Dylan stepped back, looking like his entire world had shattered. Mom, is this true? My mother burst into hysterical sobs, screaming, Elena did this. She wants to ruin us. All eyes turned to me. I finally stepped forward. No, Mom. You ruined yourself. I placed the original paternity file on the table. Everyone rushed to read it. My mother's screams grew louder. My aunt covered her mouth. My cousins whispered. Someone called my father. Someone else recorded the chaos. Dylan started crying, actual tears, as he stared at the man who looked exactly like him. My mother lunged toward me like she wanted to hit me, but my biological mother's brother, Uncle Aaron, grabbed her. You don't get to play victim this time, he growled. The room was a battlefield of shouting, crying, accusations, and shock. And I stood in the center of it all. Calm. Silent. Free. For the first time in my life. The fallout was nuclear. My father, the man who raised Dylan, filed for divorce the next morning. He moved out the same day. Dylan cut my mother off completely. He wasn't angry at me. He was angry at her. Extended family took sides. Most took mine. My mother became a social outcast overnight. Church friends whispered. Neighbors talked. Her friends avoided her. The perfect reputation she protected all her life shattered. As for me, I returned to James. He held me like he never wanted to let go. We threw a small ceremony a month later with only close friends and the family members who actually loved me. And it was perfect. My mother wasn't invited. She still tries to call me sometimes, leaving long tearful messages about how I destroyed the family. But I don't answer. Because the truth is simple. I didn't destroy the family. I exposed the destruction she caused. And I learned something important. Sometimes, revenge isn't about hurting someone. Sometimes, revenge is simply telling the truth. And letting it explode all on its own.